The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a crystal cave, its walls glowing with soft blue light. 12 different species sat in their special seats, each designed for their unique bodies. Some had 4 arms, others had tentacles, and a few looked like giant insects. They all had one thing in common today. They were discussing what to do about the humans. Ambassador Kethvar adjusted his flowing robes and looked down at the 3 humans sitting in the center of the hall. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he spoke into his translator device. "The vote is final," his mechanical voice announced to the chamber. "Humanity is no longer welcome in the Galactic Council. Your species has shown too much violence and stubbornness. You do not fit with civilized galactic society." The other council members nodded their various heads, tentacles, and antennae in agreement. The crystalline delegate's body chimed like wind bells. The hive mind representative buzzed with approval from all 1,000 of its connected parts. Sarah Chen, the lead human ambassador, sat perfectly still. She wore a simple gray uniform with no fancy decorations. Her 2 companions, Dr. Martinez and Commander Thompson, looked equally plain next to the colorful alien delegates. Sarah did not shout. She did not argue. She did not beg them to reconsider. Instead, she quietly gathered the few papers on her desk and stood up. "We understand your decision," she said in a calm voice that somehow reached every corner of the vast chamber. "Thank you for making your position clear to us." The alien delegates had expected anger. They had prepared speeches about human aggression and emotional outbursts. Some had even brought security devices in case the humans became violent. But Sarah Chen just walked toward the massive doors at the back of the hall. "Wait," called out Counselor Vexthal, the insect-like hive mind speaker. "Do you have nothing else to say? No protests? No demands?" Sarah paused at the doorway and turned back. She looked at each of the 12 species representatives with a strange little smile that made several of them feel uncomfortable. "No protests," she said. "No demands. You have made it very clear that you do not want us here. We respect that choice." Her smile grew slightly wider. "We will see ourselves out." Dr. Martinez and Commander Thompson followed her through the doors without saying a single word. The massive entrance sealed shut with a soft hiss, leaving behind only silence and the faint smell of ozone. Within minutes of leaving the council chamber, Sarah Chen was sending coded messages to every human ship, station, and settlement throughout the galaxy. The message was simple: pack everything. We are going home. But home was not just Earth anymore. Humans had spread across hundreds of worlds over the past 2 centuries. They ran cargo ships between distant stars. They fixed broken equipment on alien space stations. They explored dangerous regions that other species were too afraid to enter. They had become part of the invisible machinery that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. Captain Lisa Wong received the message aboard her cargo freighter in the Outer Rim. She was delivering medical supplies to a Zalithian colony when her communication system chimed. After reading the brief message, she immediately changed course and headed for the nearest human outpost. "But Captain," her Zalithian co-pilot protested, "we are only 3 hours from delivery. The colonists need these medicines." "Not our problem anymore," Lisa replied, her voice echoing Sarah Chen's calm tone. "Find another shipping company." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human doctors stopped treating alien patients and packed their medical equipment. Human engineers powered down the systems they had been maintaining and gathered their tools. Human traders closed their shops and loaded their goods onto departing ships. The exodus was not angry or rushed. It was methodical and complete. Every human followed the same pattern: finish current tasks safely, secure all equipment and data, and leave quietly without explanation. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, Merchant Torval noticed something strange happening in the human quarter of the city. Shop after shop was closing, with signs that simply read, "Business concluded. Thank you for your patronage." "Where are you going?" he asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who was shutting down her popular medical clinic. "Away," Dr. Tanaka replied politely. "The Council has made it clear that humans are not wanted in galactic society. We are respecting their wishes." "But what about your patients? Your research?" You were working on a cure for Rigelian bone disease. Dr. Tanaka paused in packing her equipment. I was working on that cure as a member of Galactic Society. Since we are no longer members, that work is no longer relevant. She sealed the last container and picked it up. I wish you well, Torval. You were always a good neighbor. The Zilithian merchant watched her walk away, a cold feeling growing in his stomach. Dr. Tanaka had been treating his wife's chronic illness for 3 years. No other doctor in the sector understood the condition well enough to help. Throughout council space, similar realizations were beginning to dawn. The humans were not just leaving. They were taking with them years of knowledge, relationships, and expertise that other species had come to depend on without even realizing it. Mining. Foreman Kextar stood at the entrance to his asteroid processing facility, watching the last human engineer board a shuttle. The human had maintained the complex gravity systems that made mining in zero-G possible. Without those systems, the entire operation would have to shut down within a week. Surely you can stay just long enough to train a replacement. Kextar pleaded. Engineer Roberts shook his head. My contract was with the Galactic Council Mining Consortium. That contract is no longer valid. He paused at the shuttle door. Besides, training a replacement would take about 6 months. My people need me elsewhere now. The shuttle door closed and the craft lifted off, leaving Kextar staring at control panels he did not understand and gravity generators he could not repair. On the council world itself, Maintenance Chief Ziktar discovered that half of his staff had simply vanished overnight. The humans who cleaned the air systems, repaired the food processors, and maintained the communication networks had all disappeared. They left behind only brief notices thanking their employers for the opportunity to serve. The most unsettling part was how polite it all was. There were no angry letters or threats of revenge, no sabotage or destruction. The humans simply finished their work, cleaned up their areas, and left everything in perfect working order. They even left instruction manuals for basic maintenance, though the manuals were written in human languages that few other species could read fluently. As news of the human exodus spread, some council members began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. They had expected the humans to fight the decision, to prove their worth, to beg for another chance. Instead, humanity had simply accepted the judgment and walked away with quiet dignity. Ambassador Kethvar tried to push down his growing unease. Good riddance, he told his aide. Galactic civilization will be more peaceful without their disruptive influence. But as he said the words, he noticed that the temperature in his office felt different. The human technician who had maintained the environmental systems for this section of the building had left that morning. The backup systems were functioning, but they did not seem to work quite as smoothly. It was a small thing, barely noticeable. But it was the first crack in the foundation of the galaxy that the Council had just inherited, a galaxy that was about to discover just how much it had depended on the quiet competence of the species it had just thrown away. 3. Days after the vote, the last human ship disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward regions of space that the Council had never bothered to explore. They left behind a galaxy that looked exactly the same on the surface but had lost something vital that no one had even known was there. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the silence of a great machine slowly grinding to a halt. 3 months had passed since the humans left Council space. Trade Counselor Mordak of the Centauran Federation stared at his quarterly profit reports with growing confusion. Something was wrong with the numbers, but he could not figure out what. His shipping routes were still operating. His cargo ships were still moving goods between worlds. His trade agreements were still valid. Yet somehow everything was taking longer and costing more money than before. Computer, he said to his office AI, show me the efficiency ratings for shipping lanes 7 through 15. The holographic display showed red warning indicators across half of his most profitable routes. Delivery times had increased by an average of 15%. Fuel costs were up 20%. Customer satisfaction ratings had dropped significantly. What changed 3 months ago? Mordak demanded. Analysis shows the removal of human-operated vessels from all shipping contracts. The AI replied in its neutral voice. Previous efficiency ratings included human freight runners who specialized in rapid cargo delivery through hazardous space lanes. Mordak felt his 3 hearts skip a beat. He had never paid much attention to which species ran his cargo ships. As long as goods moved from point A to point B, he had not cared who did the moving. How many human operators were working my routes? 47% of express delivery contracts were handled by human crews. These have not been renewed or replaced. The Centauran businessman quickly opened his contact database and started calling human shipping companies. Every single call went to the same automated message. This service is no longer available to council space. Please contact your local trade authority for alternative arrangements. Mordak was not the only one making these discoveries. Across the galaxy, the absence of humans was creating problems that no one had seen coming. Dr. Yintal, chief medical researcher for the Galactic Health Authority, stood in her laboratory, looking at empty equipment racks. The specialized enzyme synthesizer that produced treatments for 12 different alien diseases had stopped working the week before. The human biochemist who had designed and maintained it was gone. Surely we have backup systems? Dr. Yintal asked her assistant. We do, doctor, but they only produce the basic formulation. Dr. Hamilton's modifications increased effectiveness by 60% and reduced side effects significantly. The assistant's breathing apparatus wheezed nervously. He also held the patents for the advanced synthesis process. Then we'll use the patents. The patents expired last month, Doctor. Dr. Hamilton filed a withdrawal of all technical specifications before departing council space. It is perfectly legal under Galactic law. Dr. Yintel realized with growing horror that thousands of patients across multiple species were about to lose access to life-saving medications. The human doctor had not sabotaged anything or stolen any equipment. He had simply taken his knowledge with him when he left. The problems were spreading faster than anyone had expected. In the asteroid belt mining regions, operations that relied on human pilots to navigate dangerous space rocks found themselves unable to access their most profitable sites. The human pilots had not destroyed the navigation data or blocked the routes. They had simply stopped offering their services, and no other species wanted to take the risks that humans had considered routine. Captain Vexnell of the mining vessel, Prophet's Edge, discovered this firsthand when he tried to reach the high-yield asteroid cluster known as Devil's Garden. His own species, the cautious Rigelians, had always hired human pilots for this kind of work. Computer, plot a course to mining site RG4471, he ordered. Warning: route requires navigation through Class 5 hazard zones. Current crew certification insufficient for safe passage. Recommend hiring certified hazard pilot. Where can I find one? No certified hazard pilots available in this sector. Captain Vexnell stared at the navigation display showing the asteroid field that had made his company wealthy for the past decade. The asteroids were still there. The valuable minerals were still there. But the human pilots who could safely navigate the shifting, dangerous space rocks were gone. Even more disturbing were the reports coming in from frontier worlds. Entire research stations had gone dark, not because of attacks or disasters, but because they had simply shut down and moved away. Human explorers, scientists, and colonists were not just abandoning their own projects. They were convincing other species to leave as well. Commander Tholax received an urgent message from Research Station Gamma 7, located in the dangerous Void Nebula region. The message was brief and shocking. Station operations concluded. All research data secured. Facilities decommissioned. Do not attempt rescue. Departure was voluntary. When Tholax managed to reach the station's former location, he found nothing but empty space. Detailed scans showed that the entire facility had been carefully dismantled and removed, taking with it 5 years of valuable research into nebula physics and 3 different alien science teams who had been working there. Where did they go? Tholax wondered aloud. His science officer, a methodical crystalline, provided the disturbing answer. Long-range sensors detected multiple large vessels departing this region toward uncharted space. The vessels used unfamiliar engine signatures and headed toward regions not currently mapped by Council exploration services. The humans had not just left Council space. They had taken their alien friends and colleagues with them, and disappeared into areas of the galaxy that the Council had never bothered to explore. Intelligence reports began filtering back from across the frontier. Human ships were being spotted in systems that were not supposed to have any inhabitants. Massive construction projects were detected in regions that Council surveys had marked as uninhabitable or economically worthless. The humans were building something out there, and they were not doing it alone. Fleet Admiral Zorketh of the Council, Defense Forces, found himself staring at sensor readings that made no sense. How did we lose monitoring coverage of 18 patrol routes? His tactical officer provided the unwelcome explanation. Human contractors maintained 73% of our deep space sensor arrays. They serviced equipment in regions too dangerous for regular military patrols. Then hire different contractors. Admiral, there are no different contractors. Human firms were the only ones willing to service equipment in the deep dark sectors. The deep dark was what everyone called the vast regions of space between the major star systems. These areas were filled with radiation storms, rogue asteroids, unstable gravitational fields, and other hazards that made them too dangerous for most species to travel through regularly. Everyone had been perfectly happy to let the reckless humans handle the dangerous work of maintaining sensor networks and communication relays in these areas. Now those regions had become blind spots in the Council's defense network. Entire sectors of space were effectively unmonitored, creating perfect hiding places for pirates, smugglers, and potentially hostile forces. The economic effects were becoming impossible to ignore. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were experiencing delays, accidents, and failures. Supply chains that no one had realized depended on human intermediaries were breaking down. Economic advisor Thelnus brought disturbing news to an emergency council session. The Interspecies Trade Efficiency Index has dropped 23% across all major routes. We are seeing cascading failures in supply chains we did not even know existed. Council President Vashator's tentacles, writhed in agitation. Explain this to me. Humans were serving as intermediaries between species who could not trade directly with each other. The hive minds and the crystallines, for example, their biochemistries are so different that direct trade is impossible. Human facilities served as neutral processing stations where goods could be safely transferred. The president felt a cold realization washing over him. How many of these intermediary operations were there? We are still discovering them, sir. It appears humans had inserted themselves into trade relationships throughout the galaxy, often in ways that were completely invisible to the species involved. As the weeks passed, the scope of human integration into galactic civilization became terrifyingly clear. They had not been junior members seeking approval from their betters. They had become the connecting tissue that held different parts of galactic society together. Worse yet, intelligence reports suggested that the humans had not actually left the galaxy at all. Deep space monitors were detecting human ships moving through previously unknown routes between star systems. Entire fleets were being spotted in regions that Council surveys had dismissed as empty or uninhabitable. The humans had not gone away. They had simply stopped interacting with the species that had expelled them, and they were building something new in the spaces that the Council had never bothered to look. As Council member after Council member reported new problems caused by the human absence, an uncomfortable truth was becoming clear. They had not expelled a troublesome junior species from their civilization. They had expelled the people who had been running it. 6 months after the humans departed, the Galactic Defense Network experienced its first critical failure in over 200 years. A massive solar flare erupted from the star Kepler 442, sending a wave of deadly radiation racing toward 3 inhabited worlds. The early warning system that should have detected the flare and given the colonies time to activate their shields never triggered. Admiral Zorketh stared at the disaster reports flooding his command center. 3 major trade worlds had lost their primary communication satellites. Millions of aliens were cut off from the Galactic Information Network, trapped in isolation while radiation storms raged through their star systems. "How did this happen?" the Admiral demanded. "Our sensor network is the most advanced in the galaxy." His chief tactical officer, a precise crystalline being whose body chimed softly when nervous, provided the devastating answer. Sir, the redundant warning protocols that prevented this type of failure were designed and maintained by human engineers. When they departed, they took their maintenance codes with them. Admiral Zorketh felt his mandibles click together in frustration. Why were humans responsible for such critical systems? Because they were the only species willing to work in the dangerous radiation zones around unstable stars, the tactical officer replied. The Kepler 442 monitoring station was considered a hazard posting that no other species would accept. The admiral pulled up deployment records and felt his blood grow cold. Humans had been maintaining sensor equipment throughout the galaxy's most dangerous regions, not because they were assigned to do so, but because they were the only ones brave enough or crazy enough to volunteer for such work. How many critical systems are we talking about? The tactical officer's crystalline body dimmed with distress. 73% of our deep space sensor arrays, 47% of early warning systems, and 91% of monitoring equipment in hazardous space zones. As if the military crisis was not bad enough, economic disasters were cascading through every sector of galactic civilization. Trade Councilor Mordak had called 3 emergency meetings in the past month, each bringing worse news than the last. The interstellar shipping industry is in complete chaos, he reported to the Council Assembly. Delivery times have increased by an average of 30%. Costs are up 40%. And we have completely lost access to some of the most profitable trade routes in the galaxy. President Vashator's tentacles writhed with anxiety. Lost access, what do you mean? The humans were not just shipping our goods, President. They were mapping new routes through dangerous space, finding shortcuts that other species considered too risky to use. Without their navigation expertise, we have been forced to use longer, more expensive paths between star systems. The economic problems were spreading like a plague. Manufacturing centers that had relied on human-operated supply chains found themselves unable to get critical components. Research facilities that had depended on human-maintained equipment began shutting down as their systems failed. Dr. Yintal brought the most frightening news of all to the medical authorities' emergency session. We are facing a galactic health crisis. 12 different species are experiencing medication shortages, and 3 colonies have reported the return of diseases that were eliminated decades ago. Medical Director Colthesis leaned forward with concern. How is this possible? We have strategic medical reserves throughout Council space. The reserves exist, but we cannot produce new medications to replace what we use. Human biochemists developed the synthesis processes for 68% of our current pharmaceutical catalog. When they left, they took their knowledge with them. The medical director felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Surely we have the manufacturing data in our computers. We have basic formulations, but the humans made improvements that increased effectiveness and reduced side effects. Those improvements were protected by patents that expired when they left Council space. Dr. Yintal's breathing apparatus wheezed with distress. They legally withdrew all technical specifications before departing. The crisis was not limited to technology and medicine. Cultural exchange programs were collapsing as human translators and cultural experts disappeared. The humans had been serving as bridges between species that found each other difficult to understand. And without those bridges, communication was breaking down. Ambassador Felnax of the Rigelian Collective discovered this problem when trying to negotiate a trade agreement with the Hivemind Confederation. The 2 species had completely different ways of thinking and communicating, and negotiations had always required human mediators who could understand both perspectives. We request clarification on proposal subsection 4.7.12, buzzed the Hivemind representative. The subsection clearly states our position on mineral rights. Ambassador Felnax replied. Clarification insufficient, meaning unclear. Previous negotiations utilized human interpretation protocols. The 2 diplomats stared at each other across the negotiating table, unable to bridge the gap between their fundamentally different ways of thinking. Without human mediators who could translate concepts rather than just words, they could not reach any agreements. Similar communication breakdowns were happening throughout Council space. Species that had worked together for decades found themselves unable to cooperate without the human intermediaries they had taken for granted. But perhaps the most unsettling development was the intelligence reports filtering in from across the galaxy. The humans had not disappeared. They had simply moved beyond the reach of Council monitoring systems. Long-range sensors were detecting human ships in regions of space that Council surveys had dismissed as uninhabitable or worthless. Massive construction projects were being built in systems that official records claimed were empty. Most disturbing of all, the humans were clearly not working alone. Intelligence Officer Kexval brought the latest reports to Admiral Zorketh's attention. "Sir, we have confirmed sightings of human vessels operating in the Void Nebula region, the Shattered Worlds asteroid belt, and the radiation zones around the pulsar systems." "Those regions are uninhabitable," the Admiral protested. "Our surveys confirmed they cannot support life or industrial operations." "That may have been true when we conducted those surveys 50 years ago," Kexval replied. "But long-range analysis suggests the humans have developed new technologies that allow them to work in environments we considered impossible." The intelligence reports painted a picture of a shadow civilization growing in the spaces between Council territories. Human ships were moving through hyperspace routes that Council navigation computers claimed did not exist. They were building facilities and star systems that were supposed to be too dangerous for habitation. Worse yet, they were not alone. Scanner readings showed ships of unknown design operating alongside human vessels. These were not ships belonging to any species in the Council database. They appeared to belong to civilizations that the Council had never encountered or had dismissed as primitive. The implications were staggering. The galaxy that the Council governed was apparently much smaller than anyone had realized. Vast regions of space that they had ignored or considered worthless were inhabited by species that had never been contacted by Council explorers. And now those hidden civilizations were apparently working with humanity. Emergency Council sessions became daily events as crisis after crisis revealed the true scope of galactic dependence on human expertise. The species that had been dismissed as too aggressive and stubborn to deserve Council membership had actually been the invisible foundation supporting the entire structure of galactic civilization. Fleet Admiral Zorketh found himself facing the most humiliating briefing of his military career. His intelligence staff had discovered that human contractors had been maintaining not just sensor arrays and early warning systems, but also the automated defense platforms that protected major Council worlds from asteroid impacts and space debris. "How many worlds are at risk?" he asked, dreading the answer. 47 major population centers have defense systems that will begin failing within the next 3 months without human maintenance, his tactical officer reported. The systems were designed to require specialized knowledge that only human engineers possessed. The Admiral felt his career crashing down around him. The mighty Galactic Defense Forces, protector of 12 species and hundreds of worlds, were about to become unable to defend anyone from even the simplest space hazards. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Maintenance Chief Grixtal, responsible for the upkeep of Council headquarters itself, made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the government. Hidden in the basement levels of the Council building, he found a control room that had been sealed since the humans departed. Inside were monitoring systems that tracked the operation of every major facility in Council space. Power grids, water treatment plants, transportation networks, even the air recycling systems that kept the Council chambers habitable. All of the systems were flashing red warning lights. "What is this place?" President Vashis Tor demanded when Grixtal reported his discovery. "It appears to be a central monitoring station for critical infrastructure throughout Council space. The maintenance," Chief replied nervously. 1 year after expelling humanity from the Galactic Council, civilization was bleeding to death from 1,000 small cuts. Entire sectors were sliding toward economic collapse. Piracy had increased by 400% in the unmonitored deep dark regions. 3 Council species faced population crises due to critical medical shortages that could no longer be treated. The Zalithian Empire, once the most vocal supporter of human expulsion, now faced the most humiliating crisis of all. their homeworlds, artificial atmosphere was slowly becoming poisonous to their own people. Ambassador Kethvar stood in his office, staring at readouts that spelled doom for his species. The terraforming systems that maintained breathable air on Zalithia Prime were failing, and no one knew how to fix them. The atmospheric processors are operating at 60% efficiency, his chief scientist reported with barely controlled panic. At this rate of decline, our air will become toxic within 6 months. Contact the original manufacturers, Kethvar ordered. Surely they can provide technical support. Sir, the atmospheric systems were human-designed and human-maintained. The manufacturing company was owned by humans who departed council space along with all other members of their species. Kethvar felt his 4 hearts skip in unison. Then we'll hire other engineers. The galaxy is full of brilliant scientists. The chief scientist's breathing apparatus wheezed with despair. We have tried, Ambassador. The humans used a completely unique approach to atmospheric engineering. Their systems are more efficient than anything other species have developed, but they require knowledge that apparently only humans possessed. For the first time since the expulsion vote, Ambassador Kethvar was forced to confront the possibility that he had made a terrible mistake. His own world, home to 12 billion Zalithians, was dying because the species he had dismissed as primitive had actually been keeping them alive. Similar crises were erupting throughout council space. The Rigelian Collective was facing the collapse of their interstellar banking system because human programmers had designed the quantum encryption protocols that protected financial transactions. The Crystalline Confederation's manufacturing centers were shutting down because they could not get spare parts for human-designed industrial equipment. But perhaps most embarrassing of all was the situation on the council homeworld itself. The great crystal towers that housed the Galactic government were experiencing cascade failures in their most basic systems. Water recycling plants were breaking down. Power distribution networks were becoming unreliable. Even the gravity generators that kept the massive structures stable were showing signs of strain. Maintenance Chief Grixtal found himself in the impossible position of trying to repair technologies he did not understand. Every major system in the council complex had been modified or improved by human engineers over the past decades, and those improvements were now failing without anyone to maintain them. Can we at least contact the humans and ask for help? President Fashator asked during yet another emergency session. We have tried, replied Communications Director Yeltax. All human frequencies are either silent or respond with automated messages stating that technical support is no longer available to council species. The president's tentacles writhed in frustration. What would it take to get their attention? Formal apologies? Compensation payments? Sir, we do not even know where they are, the communications director admitted. Human ships have been detected throughout uncharted regions of the galaxy, but they are not responding to any attempts at contact. It was then that Dr. Eliza Park stepped forward with an offer that seemed too good to be true. The human xenoanthropologist had remained behind after the Exodus to complete her research on council species, and she had become the only human still, willing to speak with council representatives. I might be able to help, she said during a private meeting with President Vashator. But you need to understand what you are really asking for. The president leaned forward eagerly. Anything. Our civilization is collapsing without human technical expertise. Dr. Park activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy in a way no council member had ever seen before. Instead of the neat territorial boundaries they were used to, this display showed organic networks of relationships, trade routes, and interdependencies spanning thousands of star systems. You thought humans were junior members of your civilization, Dr. Park said in a calm, professional voice. In reality, we were the circulatory system that kept your civilization alive. Look at this data. The hologram highlighted shipping routes, maintenance contracts, research collaborations, and manufacturing relationships. Everywhere the display showed human involvement, the networks were dense and complex. Where humans were absent, the connections were sparse and fragile. We did not serve you, Dr. Park continued. We enabled you. We connected species that could not work together directly. We maintained systems in dangerous regions where other species would not go. We solved technical problems that other species found too difficult or too risky to tackle. President Vashator stared at the display with growing horror. The galaxy he thought he ruled was actually a complex web of human-maintained relationships, and pulling humanity out of that web was causing the entire structure to collapse. "What would it take for your people to return?" he asked quietly. Dr. Park's expression remained neutral. "That is not really my decision to make, but I can arrange a meeting. However, you should understand that the humans you would be negotiating with are not the same people you expelled. They have learned some important lessons about their place in the galaxy." She paused, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped slightly. "They have also made some new friends. The galaxy is much larger than you realized, President, and most of it never needed your permission to exist. The meeting arrangements took weeks to organize. Human representatives finally agreed to talks, but only at a neutral location in the Outer Rim, coordinates that led to a space station that had not existed a year earlier. When council delegates arrived at the meeting site, they were shocked to discover a massive facility that was clearly a joint construction project. The basic structure showed human engineering principles, but there were also design elements from dozens of species that the council database did not recognize. The station's docking bays contained ships of unknown design alongside human vessels. The corridors were filled with beings that looked like nothing in the council's xenobiology files. Some appeared to be silicon-based life forms. Others seemed to exist as energy patterns contained in mechanical bodies. A few were so alien that council delegates could not even determine what type of life they represented. Ambassador Sarah Chen was waiting in the main conference room, but she was no longer alone. Flanking her were representatives from the Terran Colonial Alliance, the Deep Space Miners Confederation, the Frontier Sciences Consortium, and several other organizations with names the council had never heard before. Most unsettling of all were the non-human faces wearing the same insignia as the human delegates. These were clearly representatives of species that had never been contacted by council exploration services, yet they appeared to be full partners in whatever civilization humanity had built in the darkness between the stars. "Thank you for coming," Sarah Chen said with the same calm politeness she had shown during her departure from council chambers. "We understand you wanted to discuss resuming some form of relationship between our peoples." President Vashator leaned forward eagerly. "Ambassador Chen, we have come to realize that the council made a serious error in judgment. We would like to discuss the terms for humanity's return to galactic society." Sarah Chen's expression did not change, but several of the alien delegates exchanged glances that somehow conveyed amusement despite their inhuman features. "I think there may be a misunderstanding," Chen replied. "We are not seeking to return to council society. We have built our own society. It works quite well for us." Admiral Zorketh spoke up with barely controlled desperation. "But surely you understand the crisis your departure has caused. Entire sectors are facing system failures. Billions of beings are suffering because of infrastructure breakdowns." "Yes, we are aware of your difficulties," Chen acknowledged. "We have been monitoring council space to ensure that humanitarian crises do not develop. We have actually been providing emergency assistance in several cases, though we kept our involvement quiet to avoid political complications." The Admiral felt a mixture of gratitude and humiliation. "You have been helping us, even after we expelled you." "We do not hold grudges, Admiral. When the Rigelian medical crisis developed, we quietly supplied the medications needed to prevent a plague. When the asteroid mining accident occurred in the Centauri system, our rescue ships were the first to respond, though we let your people take credit for the saves." Chen gestured to her diverse delegation. "But you should understand that we are no longer the isolated species you remember. We have discovered that the galaxy contains many civilizations that your explorers never contacted. Some exist in environments you consider uninhabitable. Others deliberately avoided contact with species they considered too rigid or aggressive. Are you saying there is an entire parallel galactic civilization?" President. The meeting had been scheduled to last 3 days, but Sarah Chen finished presenting humanity's position in less than 2 hours. The message was clear, simple, and devastating to everything the Galactic Council thought they understood about their place in the universe. "We are not seeking your approval," Chen had said with quiet finality. "We are informing you of the new reality. The galaxy has changed, and you can either adapt to that change or be left behind by it." 6 months later, the first Council species formally applied for membership in the Terran Colonial Alliance. The Rigellian Collective, facing complete economic collapse without human-maintained trade networks, swallowed their pride and submitted a diplomatic request to join the growing confederation of species that operated beyond Council authority. President Vashator read the Rigellian application with a mixture of fury and terror. "This is treason against the established galactic order." His aide, a nervous young Zilithian, quietly placed another datapad on the president's desk. "Sir, we have also received informal inquiries from the Centauran Federation, the mining guilds of Kepler Prime, and 17 independent colony worlds." The president's tentacles writhed in distress as he realized that his civilization was hemorrhaging members. Species and colonies that had been loyal Council citizens for centuries were abandoning ship to join the humans and their mysterious allies. The exodus was not driven by conquest or coercion. It was driven by simple practicality. The Terran Alliance offered things that the Council could not: working infrastructure, efficient trade networks, access to advanced technologies, and most importantly, the freedom to explore and develop without bureaucratic restrictions. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become the Alliance's chief diplomatic officer, explained the situation to a gathering of Council defectors on the growing space station that served as the Alliance capital. "The Council operates on a principle of control," she told the mixed crowd of humans and aliens. "They believe that civilization requires central authority to function properly. We operate on a principle of cooperation. We believe that intelligent species can work together without someone telling them how to do it." The audience included representatives from 47 different species, only 12 of which had ever been contacted by Council explorers. The rest were civilizations that had existed in the spaces between Council territories for millennia, developing their own technologies and cultures in isolation. "The humans did not create our alliance," Dr. Vasquez continued. "They simply connected us to each other. They served as bridges between species that had never met, translators between civilizations that thought in completely different ways." In the audience, Kexnall of the Silicon Collective nodded agreement. His crystalline species had evolved in the molten cores of volcanic worlds, environments that carbon-based life forms found utterly hostile. For thousands of years they had assumed they were alone in the galaxy, because no other species could survive in their homelands long enough to make contact. "The humans came to us in environmental suits that should have melted within minutes," Kexnall explained to the gathering. "Instead, they stayed for months, learning our language and our culture. They built translation devices that could convert our electromagnetic communication into forms that other species could understand." Similar stories came from across the Alliance. The Void Runners, who existed as energy patterns in the empty spaces between stars, had been contacted by human explorers using specially designed sensor arrays. The Archive Keepers, who lived in the event horizons of black holes where time moved differently, had been reached through human experiments with temporal communication. Each contact had led to new discoveries, new technologies, and new possibilities. The humans had not conquered these species or demanded tribute from them. They had simply offered friendship and cooperation, then helped them connect with other species who shared similar interests. The result was a galactic civilization that operated on completely different principles than the Council system. Instead of a rigid hierarchy with 12 dominant species ruling over everyone else, the Alliance was a loose network of equals who worked together on projects that benefited everyone. Trade Captain Yuki Sato demonstrated this principle during a presentation on Alliance commerce. "We do not have trade wars or economic competition," she explained. "The Silicon Collective needs rare metals that are toxic to most life forms. The Void Runners can easily collect these metals from stellar coronas where no physical being could survive. The archive keepers have developed temporal storage systems that can preserve goods indefinitely. She activated a holographic display showing trade flows throughout Alliance space. Everyone contributes what they do best and receives what they need most. The humans serve as coordinators and facilitators, but we are not in charge of anyone. This cooperative approach was producing results that made Council economists weep with envy. Alliance worlds were experiencing unprecedented prosperity, while Council territories struggled with infrastructure failures and economic stagnation. The technological advances were even more impressive. Alliance scientists had developed faster-than-light communications by combining human engineering with archive keeper temporal manipulation. They had created new types of spacecraft by merging human metallurgy with silicon collective crystal growing techniques. Most remarkably, they had begun terraforming previously uninhabitable worlds by using Void Runner energy manipulation to reshape planetary environments. Captain Lisa Wong, now commanding the Alliance exploration vessel, New Horizons, brought back reports of discoveries that revolutionized understanding of galactic geography. The Council surveys were wrong about almost everything, she reported to Alliance leadership. Regions they marked as empty are actually full of life. Systems they classified as uninhabitable are home to thriving civilizations. They missed entire stellar clusters because they only looked for planets that resembled their own homeworlds. Her exploration teams had made contact with over 100 new species in just 6 months of operation. Each contact brought new knowledge, new technologies, and new perspectives on how intelligent life could develop and thrive. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The Alliance operated on the assumption that diversity was strength rather than weakness. Instead of trying to create uniformity, they celebrated differences and found ways to turn those differences into advantages. Dr. James Chen, Sarah's younger brother and the Alliance's chief xenobiologist, explained this principle during a research presentation. The Council approach was to classify species and fit them into predetermined categories. He said, "Our approach is to learn from each species and see what unique insights they can provide. Every form of intelligence we encounter teaches us something new about the universe." His research team included beings that thought in ways that would have been impossible for purely human science to understand. The hive mind refugees who had left Council space brought collective intelligence that could process vast amounts of data simultaneously. The energy-based void runners could perceive phenomena that physical instruments could not detect. The silicon collective could perform calculations in crystalline matrices that were far more efficient than any computer. The combination of these different types of intelligence was producing breakthroughs in physics, biology, engineering, and philosophy that no single species could have achieved alone. News of these advances filtered back to Council space through the few remaining diplomatic channels, creating growing unrest among Council populations who were watching their neighbors prosper, while their own lives became increasingly difficult. Ambassador Kethvar found himself in the humiliating position of having to request emergency aid from the Alliance when Zalithia Prime's atmospheric systems finally collapsed completely. The Alliance response was swift and efficient. Human engineering teams arrived within days and restored breathable air to the planet, using technologies that made the old systems look primitive, but the price of salvation was political embarrassment. The Zalithian population could not help but notice that the primitive humans had solved in weeks a crisis that Council scientists had been unable to address for months. Similar incidents were occurring throughout Council space. Alliance ships appeared whenever humanitarian disasters struck, providing aid that Council authorities could not match. Each rescue operation demonstrated the growing gap between Council capabilities and Alliance resources. President Vashitor watched his political support crumble as world after world began questioning why they remained loyal to a government that could not protect them or provide for their needs. The breaking point came during the Kessler crisis, when a cascade failure of orbital debris around the heavily populated world of New Geneva threatened to destroy all satellites and space stations in the system. Council emergency services were completely inadequate to handle a disaster of such magnitude. Alliance ships arrived before Council authorities even finished assessing the situation. Using advanced force field technologies and precise gravitational manipulation, they cleared the debris field in a matter of hours and restored safe orbital access to the planet.